Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is the one and only H.G. Tudor. H.G. Tudor is an expert on narcissism and an author. He's written many books about narcissism, including Sex and the Narcissist, No Contact, Escape, Fuel, and Fury. And you can find out more about H.G. Tudor and his wonderful work at his website, narcsite.com. Welcome, H.G. Tudor.
Thank you, Catherine. Pleasure to be here.
So, H.G. Tudor, you talk a lot about narcissism, and you are a world-recognized expert on narcissism. From your point of view as a self-avowed narcissist, what exactly is an empath?
Okay. Well, an empath is prey to my kind, and the empath is an individual that we target specifically to cater to our needs. Now, an empath is an individual that is made up of both empathic traits such as honesty, decency, having a strong truth seeker trait, a sense of justice, being a love devotee, and also having narcissistic traits as well, such as pride and vanity and anger and argumentativeness. And sometimes those narcissistic traits can be pretty strong, but they're kept in check by the even stronger empathic traits. And an empath has emotional empathy. They have emotional empathy for a wide range of people, and that's what guides their behavior, almost like an invisible force, that they don't have to think about, oh, should I treat this person in this particular way? They just do, because it's instinctively the way that they function. Now, empaths aren't saints. They make mistakes. They can suffer an erosion of their emotional empathy. So they end up perhaps cheating on somebody or losing their temper with somebody. But the empathic individual isn't routinely manipulative. They can be, but they're not routinely so. And they are guided, as I've mentioned, by this almost invisible force of their emotional empathy to cause them to behave in a particular way. And they also have an addiction to narcissists. It's part of what they are. And that's only problematic when they're near narcissists. But that addiction makes them easier for us to ensnare them, and makes it easier for my kind to keep them ensnared. So empaths, and there's a lot more to them than what I've described, but those are the essential aspects of their characters, and they are our choice prey.
Now, are there different kinds of empaths?
There are. So for the purposes of helping people understand and how that interacts and meshes with other with narcissists, I categorize empaths into schools. So there's standard, contagion, super, and codependent, 4 schools, and then 5 cadres, which are savior, geezer, carrier, magnet, and martyr. And each individual has some constituent parts of the school and the constituent parts of the cadre. And basically, dependent upon the way that that's constituted, it impacts upon the way that that individual behaves, what their susceptibilities are. So empaths have certain things in common. So for example, all empaths have addiction to narcissists. All empaths have emotional empathy for a wide range of people. They have lots of empathic traits which are stronger than their narcissistic traits. And then there are differences. Some empathic individuals take on the energy and the feelings of other people if they're own. Some empaths, that doesn't happen with them. Some empaths find validation by pouring themselves into the black hole that is the narcissist, and in a way feel as though they can't survive without being alongside a narcissist. Others do not. Some draw a line in the sand with the way that they're treated by a narcissist, so that they rise up and fight against that behavior at an earlier juncture. Some empathic individuals fountain with emotions. Others turn heads and draw people to them. So there's certain similarities between them, and then there's the differences occasioned by the schools and by the cadres also.
So HG, for our audience, will you please go into greater detail about the 4 schools of narcissists? The 4 schools of empaths.
Okay, well, you have the standard empath, which is sort of like your baseline, which is the largest category. Most empaths are what I call the standard empath. So that's an individual, as I mentioned, has the addiction. That's the individual that isn't naturally manipulative and exercises their decisions and behaviors guided by their emotional empathy. You then have the codependent. The codependent has a sort of slavish devotion to the narcissist, and either, dependent upon the percentage of the type, because nobody is 100% of a particular type of school. So what you might have is, you might have somebody who is a majority standard, so say 60%, and then they might be 30% codependent and 10% super. And so the varying percentages also have an impact upon the individual. So let's take, for example, somebody who is a majority standard. That means that they are governed by their behavior on a day-to-day basis through this emotional empathy, but they have 30% codependency. And so they have that strong minority element, which means that there might be, say, 4, possibly 5, maybe 6 triggers. So they don't operate on a day-to-day basis with codependency. The standard nature governs their day-to-day behaviors. But if one of those codependent triggers is activated, their behavior shifts from that of a standard empath to that of a codependent. So for instance, if the narcissist threatens to leave them, or the narcissist does leave them, that might be, for that particular person, one of the relevant triggers, and that causes them to switch their behaviors so that they function as a codependent because of that trigger, meaning that they show a slavish devotion to the needs of the narcissist, they cling on to the narcissist, they find validation by being with the narcissist, and they pour themselves into the black hole that is the narcissist, giving and giving and giving, and the narcissist takes. The contagion is somebody whereby they'll have those similar baseline behaviors as with all of the other categories, but the distinguishing factor that exists is that they have the ability to feel the emotions and energy of other people, to sometimes to an extent that they feel overwhelmed by it, meaning that they would have to retreat from the person that they're dealing with, or the people that they're dealing with, to allow those increased emotions and energy to drain away from them. So they might need to put themselves away from people. And then you have the super empath, whereby this isn't somebody who's like some caped crusader or is some kind of kick-ass ninja type that goes around slaying narcissists. People have a misconception about the super empath, and invariably it's unaware mid-range narcissists who think that they are a super empath, and they're not. And with a super empath, what that means is that individual has a greater level of resilience, so that when they're facing the abusive behaviors of a narcissist, they tend to rail against it at an earlier juncture. And rather than absorbing and tolerating it, they draw a line in the sand at an earlier juncture. So what you've got to remember is, if you have a majority, then that's the type of school that governs your day-to-day behavior. But you'll also have minority aspects of other schools as well, which have an influence. So it's quite a complicated picture, and it's certainly very detailed in terms of all of the various traits and characteristics and how they work with one another. But that's a brief overview with regard to those 4 schools.
So for our audience, then, if I'm hearing you correctly, H.G. Tudor, the 4 schools of empath include standard, codependent, super, and what was the 4th one?
Contagion.
Contagion. All right. And then you also mentioned there were cadres. Are these archetypes of empaths? Is that another word for it?
Well, it is a form of it. If you like, the way to look at it is the school governs the behavior, and the cadre is almost like a kind of preference of behavior, preference of activity. So the carrier, as the name would suggest, is somebody that shoulders the mantle of responsibility, often undertakes perhaps being the breadwinner, being the person that deals with domestic chores, person that looks after the children. They're the person that can be depended upon to soldier on when things get tough. And they don't go around shouting about the fact that they do that. They just get on with it. Again, it's a common misconception, again, propagated by unaware mid-range narcissists that think they're empaths, that you go around shouting about the fact that you're an empath. You don't. Saviors, the savior cadre is what it explains, that individual rides into battle on behalf of another person. And that could be quite attractive for certain narcissists that feel that they need a defender. Then you have geezer, which is basically an individual that wears their heart on their sleeve, and a range of particular emotions results in a heightened emotional output from them, which means that they tend to give more fuel, which is attractive to certain of the lazier narcissists, the lessers. So, for instance, they're not just happy, they're rapturous with joy. They're not sad, they're distraught, and so on and so forth. There's a heightened emotional response that they have, and the extent of that depends upon how much of a geezer cadre that they have. With martyr, that's carrier 2.0, where the individual engages in helping others, but to such a degree that they suffer some kind of harm. So, for instance, it might be that they run around after the narcissist, attending to their daily needs to the extent that they become exhausted or unwell, or that they engage in certain sexual practices to appease the narcissist that demeans them, but they still do it. And then finally, there's magnet. And that's a magnetic individual whereby people are naturally drawn to them, want to spend time with them, want to share their thoughts and hopes and desires with them. And the extent of it varies dependent upon the varying percentages that are applicable to those cadres also.
Thank you, H.G. Tudor. And is this information that you studied, or you sort of come to yourself through your own study and observation of human beings?
I arrived at this as a consequence of my interactions with empathic individuals and observing the way that they behaved and what made them tick, and then broke it down into these schools and cadres to help people gain a better understanding of themselves. Because when I advise people through consultation, I naturally help them make sense of what it is that they've been dealing with. I naturally enable them to make sense of how they can help themselves vis-a-vis dealing with a narcissist, but they also need to understand what they are. And where they're an empathic individual, it gives them particular insight to know what type of empath they are and what that means. And so I took all of these behaviors, and there's a lot more work that I'm going to divulge and share in relation to empaths. I'm pulling it all together still, but I use that information in the context of empath detectors and consultations to help people understand what they are and why they behave as they do around people and particular narcissists.
Thank you. And with that great information from H.G. Tudor, expert on narcissism, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. And we'll be right back with more great information from H.G. Tudor about understanding empaths and their relationship with narcissists. H.G. Tudor, when it comes to interpersonal relationships, do narcissists pick out or target empaths to have relationships with?
Absolutely, we do. What we look for are empathic traits and class traits and special traits. So the empathic traits signal to us that you exercise your judgment and behaviors in a particular way, and we know that we will benefit from that. The class traits determine, for instance, that you fit with our preferences. If we're a somatic narcissist, or a cerebral narcissist, or a victim narcissist, or an elite narcissist, those are the cadres of narcissist. And then the special traits are things such as, have you been with a narcissist before? So in effect, you're tenderized to us. It makes it easier for us to ensnare you. Do you have a particular vulnerability that we might be able to use against you? You know, for instance, did you lose a parent when you were a young child? Have you suffered some kind of particular trauma? For instance, were you raped or suffered a sexual assault when you were younger? Those type of things. And so both in a calculated fashion with an aware narcissist, or in an instinctive fashion with an unaware narcissist, we look out for those traits in an individual that we determine that is an empath. And because of the person being an empath and having an innate addiction to the narcissist, basically empaths serve our needs the best because they're the easiest to be ensnared and the easiest to keep ensnared, and that they cater to our needs vis-a-vis the prime aims of being able to control them, providing us with fuel, character traits, and residual benefits.
So what is it exactly about empaths that make them easy prey for narcissists?
Essentially, it's the addiction. So what happens is all empaths have an addiction to narcissists. And as I mentioned earlier on, Catherine, that's not a problem if you're not near a narcissist. But if you are, what happens is the addiction wants to be fed. And the way that it is fed is to cause a victim to interact with the narcissist as much as possible. So for instance, the best outcome, of course, is to spend physical time with the narcissist. So to go for a walk together, to have a coffee together, even to have an argument, to have sex, whatever it might be. It's also to communicate with the narcissist, to do things in relation to that narcissist, and the narcissist underpants, snoop on the narcissist's social media to see what the narcissist is up to, talk about the narcissist with other people and think about the narcissist. And each time a victim does one or more of those things, he or she feeds the addiction. So the addiction, if you imagine, sits there, and if we gave it a voice, it would be there saying, feed me, feed me. I want you to talk to the narcissist so I get fed. And in order to compel that, the addiction creates something called emotional thinking. Now, this isn't being hysterical. What it means is that the victim makes decisions which aren't logical and instead is governed by this emotional thinking, which basically makes them continue to interact with the narcissist and thus feed the addiction. And continuing to engage with a narcissist is not the right thing to do. Because if you do that, you give us fuel, which means we win. And you're likely to suffer an adverse consequence. We'll upset you. We might hurt you physically. We'll frustrate you. So you're exposed to abuse, which obviously isn't in your best interests. It also increases the risk of being hoovered. And also it keeps your emotional thinking high. So in effect, you stay within this fog of confusion. And emotional thinking is rather tricky and conniving. So it masks itself often as something sensible. So what it does is it poses a triple threat through flawed logic, the corruption of your traits, and what I call charging up the battery of feeling. So for instance, what it'll do is it'll make you think to yourself, I need to go and speak to this chap to find out why he's treating me the way that he has. And you think, that's logical, because I'm going to get some answers out of him. But it's not, because that person is a narcissist. So you're now going to go and talk to that narcissist in person, thus giving the narcissist fuel. Thus the narcissist is winning. The narcissist isn't going to give you any straight answers. And in fact, you get upset because you're not getting those straight answers. And the narcissist is nasty to you, and so calls you bad names. And so you're exposed to a bit of a tongue lashing. Thirdly, you might increase the risk of the narcissist coming after you by way of a malign hoover. And fourthly, you've just increased your emotional thinking because you've interacted. So the problem is that you think, good idea, I'll go and speak to the narcissist to find out why he ended the relationship and why he's gone off with Annie No-Knickers next door. But it isn't, and you're duped in effect by your emotional thinking into doing it. Now, non-narcissists, namely normals, don't suffer from that addiction. So what tends to happen is they see the problems in the behavior. They don't necessarily realize they're dealing with a narcissist. But when a narcissist comes along and love bombs, a normal person will go, whoa, this guy's a bit too much. He's ringing me every night. He's bought me 3 presents and it's not even my birthday. And, he's always flattering me and telling me, he can't do without me. And I've only been seeing him 3 weeks. Nah, this is too much. I don't like this. I'm out. Whereas an empathic individual wouldn't do that because their emotional thinking would cause them to think, oh, isn't it wonderful that this person's so interested in me and wants to spend so much time with me? And oh, he's bought me these gifts. How sweet of him he is. And even if you might think to yourself, it's a little bit over the top, the empathic individual, because of their emotional thinking, is more likely to interpret the behaviors, you will, in a favorable way so they continue to interact with the narcissist, which makes it much easier for us. So rather than you go, this guy's a bit full on, I'm out, you go, oh, it's wonderful, he's really interested in me. I want to see more of him because he makes me feel so special. And therefore, it makes it easier for us to keep a hold on you because you keep saying, I want to spend time with you.
Now, what are some signs, H.D. Tudor, that an empath has become addicted to a narcissist?
Well, it's not a case of you become addicted to a narcissist. You have the addiction from the get-go. So you are effectively created with it as a child. And so when you enter adulthood, your addiction manifests. So you've already got it. And to understand that you have it, basically you'll find that an examination of relationships, both romantic, familial, social, that you'll start to recognize a pattern of being involved with a certain type of person, i.e. the narcissist. You will notice that you find it very difficult to get away from that person and to stay away from that person. You find yourself making excuses and explanations for continuing the involvement in some way. You'll find yourself thinking, I don't know what it is, but I just don't seem to be able to stay away from this person. Those are all manifestations of the addiction, but you don't in effect become addicted. You have the addiction created in you as a child so that when you start to form relationships when you're older, the addiction governs your choices.
Great explanation. Now, H.G. Tudor, as you know, psychologists talk about attachment styles, so how people act in relationships. So what you're saying, if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, is that a lot of empaths have anxious attachment styles, and a lot of narcissists have avoidant attachment styles. Did I get that right?
In effect, that's correct, yes.
Now, when an empath spends many years with a narcissist, can the empath take on the traits of a narcissist and become more narcissistic themselves?
They don't acquire narcissism. I know there's this concept of narcissistic fleas. That's wrong. You don't become a narcissist by spending time with a narcissist. What happens is, as I explained earlier on, the empath is made up of both empathic and narcissistic traits. Now, ordinarily, those narcissistic traits are kept in check by the empathic one, so they function in a healthy way. So an example of that is, let's take the narcissistic trait of pride. A healthy narcissistic trait of pride means you look after the way that you look, so you exercise, you wear nice clothes, you buy the potions and lotions, and you eat sensibly. And you do all of that without causing a problem for anybody else. If you were a narcissist, you might decide that you're going to eat in this particularly fatty diet and you force all of your family to do so, irrespective of whether they want to or not. that you spend money that doesn't belong to you on expensive clothes so that you look good. You'd rather go down the gym to keep yourself body beautiful and miss your child's Christmas play. So the narcissist, because they have no emotional empathy and no empathic traits keeping that narcissistic one in check, do things which hurt other people. The empath doesn't. However, when an empathic person, and this also can apply to a normal person as well, but we'll stick with empaths, when there is an external stressor, be it alcohol, drugs, fatigue, bereavement, loneliness, ill health, financial pressure, stress at work, and typically abuse, those empathic traits and the emotional empathy become eroded. They're ground down. And then the narcissistic traits almost come out to play unfettered. It's not a permanent state of affairs. And that's why, for instance, you might find that an empathic person cheats on their partner, because the lure of the narcissist reduces their emotional empathy for their partner, and their narcissistic trait of infidelity is exposed, so they cheat. Or an empathic person turns around and punches their abuser in the face. They would ordinarily never physically assault somebody, but they do it because their narcissistic trait of anger becomes exposed by the reduction of their emotional empathy because of the abuse, so they punch their abuser on the nose. So you don't acquire the traits, your existing traits become exposed and come out and are unleashed.
Now, you've made many excellent videos on YouTube talking about different celebrities and well-known people and using them as examples to teach people about narcissism. And a couple that you've done a lot of videos about include Prince Harry, and as you refer to her, Harry's wife, Meghan Markle. So in your professional opinion, what kind of empath is Prince Harry, and what kind of narcissist is Meghan Markle?
Well, with Prince Harry, he would fit the profile of a codependent empath, whereby he shows a slavish devotion to her needs and that he's completely swallowed her cool aid, and he has strong narcissistic traits himself. And as a consequence of the abuse that he's been experiencing, that has ground down his emotional empathy for other people, namely his family and his friends, causing him to behave in the way that he is, which, to put it bluntly, is pretty reprehensible. Now, many people think that he's a narcissist. He's not. He does have emotional empathy, and he has a lot of it. And you only have to look at the behaviors that he exhibited before she came along. That, again, he's not a saint. There are instances where he has done things wrong because of external stresses. And he is damaged. He has a huge special trait as a consequence of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. And that made him particularly susceptible to somebody such as Harry's wife to come along and get hold of him. I have spent time with Prince Harry in the past and know that's why he's got considerable emotional empathy. I can't tell you the circumstances of it, but he can be a dickhead at times because of the impact of what he's experienced, and that his emotional empathy is ground down. And unfortunately, because of his addiction, and because at the moment there are suggestions that he's repeatedly taking drugs as well, and because of the grip of his wife, you've almost got this perfect storm whereby he believes everything that she tells him, and he's caught up in their shared fantasy. And so that he can't understand or see that his behavior is self-destructive, that it's awful towards other people. He truly believes, because of the Kool-Aid that he's been forced down his throat by his wife, that what they're doing is justified and right. On the face of it, his behavior is far from that of an empath, but he behaves empathically towards her by virtue of his addiction towards her and the way that he seeks to protect her. She went straight in there and basically put her hand inside him and squeezed the vulnerability, which is this. He believes that his mother was killed as a consequence of the royal family not protecting her and the press. And so Harry's wife has come along and said, you don't want me to end up like your mum, do you? And that's she's got him right in there with that vulnerability, which basically allows her to control him. Now, in terms of what type of narcissist she is, as I've explained in my videos, mid-range. I haven't said whether she's A or B yet. I'm keeping that up my sleeve. I will let people know about that in due course. And in terms of her cadre, she's somatic because she has a focus on looks and money and status and clothing, and she's undertaken plastic surgery. Although she likes to think of herself as educated, she's far from a cerebral narcissist, and she doesn't get over the threshold to be an elite, which is an amalgam of both somatic and cerebral. So she would be somatic. So his majority would be codependent, and he has, in terms of cadre, I would suggest that he has a substantial savior aspect to him, martyr aspect to him, and geezer aspect to him, because he is quite emotional, and we see this as it flares up. And as mentioned, he has substantial narcissistic traits, which are repeatedly coming to the fore as a consequence of him being on the receiving end of the abuse.
Great information. And with that, let's take another break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. And we'll be right back with HD Tudor and a deeper understanding about empaths and their relationship with narcissists. HD Tudor, you coach many people who have been damaged by relationships with narcissists. How does being in a relationship with a narcissist affect an empath?
There are lots of different ways that it'll impact upon somebody. They can simply have what they thought was a wonderful relationship then revealed to be awful, and they can't comprehend what went wrong. And therefore, they are left confused and bewildered. They can find themselves being cheated on. They can find themselves having their money taken. They can find themselves having their job affected by it. They could find themselves being alienated from their children. They could find themselves on the receiving end of physical assault, sexual assault. They could find themselves becoming mentally unwell as a consequence of the repeated challenges to their reality, and that their self-esteem becomes crushed as a consequence of the invalidation and belittlement that they experience. So there is a whole range of outcomes for an empathic person which are deleterious to their well-being and can vary. And for some people, they can be upset about the way that they've been treated and angry, and they have quite a degree of resilience and bounce back fairly quickly. Other people, it can take years for them to move on beyond what has happened to them in terms of the psychological and emotional suffering that they've experienced. It could take them years to put their finances back together. It can cause them years to put their relationships back together that have been affected by the behavior of the narcissist. So there is a wide range of impacts that we have upon our victims.
Now, what should an empath do to get out of a relationship with a narcissist safely and effectively?
Well, first of all, talk to me so that you can also establish that you are actually dealing with a narcissist, because the starting point is to recognize what is it that you're dealing with. Because sometimes people think they're dealing with narcissists and they're not. And therefore, that causes you to have a different trajectory in terms of how you deal with the situation. In effect, there are more options available to you. If you are correct and you're dealing with a narcissist, it's very helpful to know which type you're dealing with, because that will then enable you to understand what the narcissist is likely to do, and just as importantly, what the narcissist is less likely to do. So it's very important to do that groundwork. Then it's to have a discussion with me in terms of where are you in terms of the nature of your ensnarement. So, for example, if your boyfriend and girlfriend that don't live together, don't have community property, don't rely upon that person for money, you don't have any children, then it's a lot simpler in terms of the imposition of a no contact regime. And you immediately end the relationship. You don't tell the narcissist you've done so, and you implement a no contact regime, in which I'll advise you on as to what that looks like across all the various arenas of interaction that you have to stay out of. If you are more enmeshed with the narcissist in terms of children, money, living together, then what one has to balance is taking certain steps to get your ducks in a row as against ensuring that you actually do move forward. Because one of the risk factors is that some individuals think, well, I'm dealing with a narcissist, but they're kept in place by fear, so they don't actually end up leaving them. And the problem is that because they're living with the narcissist, they're in all 5 arenas, which keeps their emotional thinking high. And they keep thinking of excuses and reasons why they can't leave. And that's their emotional thinking. So what you have to do is balance I'd like to get things arranged so that I can get out, as against, but if you take too long, you'll never leave, and you'll always find a reason or an excuse not to go. And before you know it, 5 years has gone by, 10 years has gone by, and you've still not left because you're waiting for that right moment. So there's a balancing exercise to be done. But what I do is I take you through, by knowing where you are at with the particular narcissist, I will then advise you of the risk factors that you face and all of the steps that you can take and that you must take to protect yourself vis-a-vis preparatory work and then the actual execution of your no contact regime. And because I know what we look for and what we do in terms of trying to break that down, I can give you the best advice in terms of what you must do to make it work.
Now, H.G. Tudor, as you know, there are many stages of change that people go through when they're in a relationship and they're not happy. And so many of my clients think, well, maybe I can make it work. Is it possible to have a healthy, happy relationship between a narcissist and an empath?
No. The relationship works for us. It doesn't work for you. It does initially when we draw you in. It has to be all wonderful to begin with to get you into our world. But thereafter, when you have a relationship with a narcissist, there will always be some form of problems with it. And the most typical relationship of boyfriend and girlfriend, man and wife, spouses, partners, cohabs, whatever it might be, that's the dynamic of narcissist and intimate partner primary source. And in that instance, it follows this course. You'll be seduced, you will be devalued, and then either you'll escape, unusual, you'll be disengaged, most common outcome, or you get the roller coaster of devaluation, respite, devaluation, respite, until one of you dies. You will not be able to control the narcissist. You will not have a happy relationship. It just cannot happen because it's the way the dynamic works with us, and we are designed to be the controller, not to be controlled. And we are designed to get what we want out of the relationship, not what you want. And ultimately, we get bored of you, see you as treacherous, and start to hurt you.
From the empaths you have coached, what are the top things these people need to do to recover from their relationship with a narcissist?
1, know that you were dealing with a narcissist and accept that. 2, then ensure that you implement a no contact regime. And most people have no idea what that involves. I have people who first come to me and they say, HG, I'm in no contact. He's sending me text messages, but I don't read them. And I say, that's not no contact. And they go, is it not? And they're genuinely surprised. So understand that you're dealing with a narcissist and what that entails. Implement the no contact regime and make sure it's a proper one. Then focus on you. Don't focus on the narcissist. Don't focus on what the narcissist is doing or what the narcissist might be up to. You don't need to know. You focus on you. And you focus on keeping the narcissist away from you and you keeping yourself away from the narcissist. And that actually tends to be the harder battle for people. Resisting the temptation to go and have a little sneak peek on the narcissist's social media to see what he's doing. Avoiding the urge to go over events again with your friend or pick up a bit of gossip about what the narcissist has been doing. Resisting the urge to think about this time last year, things were wonderful with the narcissist. No, it wasn't. It was an illusion. Cast it from your mind. The sooner you make the narcissist persona non grata, the faster you will move forward. And you must learn what you are, learn about your susceptibilities. You must not go looking for a new relationship. Many people think to themselves, the best way to get over somebody is to get under somebody new. No, it's not. You're banned from romantic relationships because you'll probably walk into the arms of another narcissist. Getting over a situation involving a family narcissist, you have to eradicate that person as being a member of your family. And people go, well, she's my mum. No, she's not. She's a narcissist. You have to reframe your thinking and apply your no contact regime. And the more that you maintain it, the faster you will move forward, because you will not be abused any longer, because you're not being involved with the abuser. You will reduce your emotional thinking, which means you will make sensible decisions based on logic rather than stupid decisions based on emotions. And the battery of feeling that makes you feel sad and hurt and angry and frustrated and worthless loses its charge, so that you don't feel sad any longer and you don't feel upset. But if you keep involving yourself with one or more narcissists, that battery stays charged and you will stay angry and upset, even though you're thinking, my relationship ended 6 months ago. Why have I not got over it? Because you actually haven't moved on from the relationship. You're still communicating with the narcissist. You're still watching what he's doing on social media. You're still talking about him with, no doubt, some very bored family and friends, and you're allowing it into your thoughts each and every day. So you're keeping your emotional thinking high, and you're keeping the relationship alive. So your emotional thinking is strong, so it can punish you. It can make you sad. So those are the steps that individuals need to take. And the biggest thing that you can do is come to me, because I'm the expert.
So you mentioned don't immediately go into a relationship. How long, in your professional opinion, does it actually take to recover from having a relationship with a narcissist? Like, what's a reasonable period of time?
5 to 6 months. But that's total no contact. So if you're not doing it, total no contact, it'll take longer to get that emotional thinking down. The useful analogy is losing weight. If you need to lose 3 stone, okay, you could chop one of your legs off, which could get rid of 3 stone, but I wouldn't advise doing that. And instead, what you have to do is eat less and exercise more over a period of time. Now, and it would ordinarily take you roughly, say, 6 months to get to that point of losing 3 stone, thereabouts. If you keep eating pizza and donuts and then not doing your exercise, it might take you 9 months instead. So the same point applies. If you keep breaching your no contact regime, it'll take longer. The sooner you implement it, and the sooner you ensure that it stays as a tight no contact regime, the sooner your emotional thinking gets down to a safer level, so that you can go out in the world and perhaps find a non-narcissist.
What words of warning do you have for an empath who is contemplating a relationship with a narcissist?
Well, you're mad if you're doing that, quite simply. If you are contemplating maintaining a relationship when it's identified that you're dealing with a narcissist, you've taken leave of your senses and you're being affected by emotional thinking. No rational, logical individual would ever contemplate doing that.
Okay, now how can an empath make sure that their next partner is not a narcissist?
1, do the sort of cleansing that I've just described of 6 months away from the narcissist that you were with before. Stay away from hunting grounds. Don't look to date anybody in that period of time, so you minimize the risk of being ensnared by another narcissist. Other narcissists that you're aware of in your family, in your friendship groups, in your family, go no contact with them, or nearly total no contact. Because the addiction isn't just to the narcissist you've had the relationship with, it's to all narcissists. Now, you cannot realistically go through life having nothing to do with narcissists completely. You'd have to go and live in a cave in the mountains to do that. So, but brushing up against a narcissist who serves you in a shop for 5 minutes, that's okay. Having a 10-minute conversation with a narcissist at work, and then you don't have another conversation with them for a month, that's okay. Known narcissists to stay away from. Stay away from hunting grounds, which are set out in my book, Sitting Target, so you don't run the risk of meeting a new narcissist. And this will reduce your emotional thinking. So basically, you sober up. And at the same time, read my books, Red Flag and Black Flag, and access Early Warning Detector, which you'll find in my knowledge vault at narcsite.com. And then you'll furnish yourself with the material that tells you these are the things to look out for in respect of prospective narcissists. And allied with sobriety, by having reduced your emotional thinking and now being armed with the tools of detection, between those two things, when you start a relationship with someone, if a narcissist is drawn to you, you'll spot them far quicker and you'll evade them before your emotional thinking gets to a tipping point and you're all in.
Now, H.G. Tudor, as you know, during this discussion, we've been primarily talking about romantic relationships between empaths and narcissists. However, as you say, there are narcissists everywhere you see.
Mm-hmm.
And if an empath has had family members who are narcissists, what's the best way of dealing with a family member, a mother, a father, a brother, etc., aunt, uncle, sister?
Same principles. You go no contact. And if you're not willing to do that, then there are steps that you can take to minimize your involvement. I have a specific assistance package called How to Handle a Parental Narcissist, which sets out the implementation of a no contact regime and how you go about that. And if for whatever reason you're not willing to do that, the steps that you can take to minimize your involvement and handle them as best as you possibly can. But I would emphasize no contact is always the best route to go down. And how to handle a parental narcissist is applicable also if you've got adult children who are narcissists or you've got siblings who are narcissists. It's equally applicable in terms of the principles there. So if there are people listening who find themselves in that situation, you want to go no contact, but that assistance package tells you how to go about it, and it also assists you if, for whatever reason, you won't implement total no contact, the next best thing that you can do.
So H.G. Tudor, author of many books on narcissism and an expert on narcissism, any final thoughts for our audience about how empaths can deal with the narcissist in the world?
Understand that there are far more of us than you realize. However, we are only a problem for you if you become enmeshed with us. And by utilizing my work and my expertise, you'll be able to recognize us, understand yourself, and avoid us before it's too late.
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been the one and only H.G. Tudor, world expert on narcissism. You can find out more about H.G. Tudor and his wonderful work at narcsite.com. And remember, if you are in a relationship with a narcissist, the only healthy way to be happy is to get out. Wouldn't you agree, H.G.?
Absolutely. Get out and stay out. The principle of go so.
Go so. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.